Chapter 1798 Relay. Jangi was not in a hurry. According to the coordinates, it would only take him 2 minutes to reach the target location, so he prioritized getting everyone to organize their equipment and make sure they adjusted themselves to their best condition before setting off. Boss. My stomach hurts a bit. Fatty Sue covered his stomach, his facial expression a little twisted. There's a bathroom in shadow space, settle it on the way. Jangi waved his hand towards him. Seeing that the crowd was looking at him with somewhat strange gazes, Fatty Sue explained with a red face, I'm just a bit nervous. There's nothing to be nervous about. Jangi said indifferently, although it sounds like that Guay is terrifying, our primary goal is to save people. However, the corner of his mouth lifted into an excited smile, if there's a chance, of course we have to maximize the benefits. Jangi himself slowly and methodically organized his entire armament. Including the entire Fremon's arsenal that he had robbed, it had also been equipped by him. As long as he needed it, he could pour out enough high-intensity firepower to flood the entire city at any time. Afterwards, everyone entered Muyan's shadow space, and Jangi opened the dimensional gate and headed towards Alto City. But there was one thing that Jangi detected a hint of subtlety, and so did Yang Xinxin, but neither of the two said anything. Because it was hard to guarantee that it wasn't a coincidence. A few hundred kilometers away from Alto City, Brahma's troops had just finished a battle. The size of the mechanical legions here was not as large as the ones they had encountered before. Brahma's forces also fought smoother this time, and didn't suffer a large number of casualties due to lack of preparation like the first time. The enhancement ability user Azura came down and began to cooperate with Emperor Indra to quickly dispose of the super-large mechanical life forms. Then they proceeded to clear the huge number of mass-produced machines. Their mutant forces were not superior in numbers, and they no longer blindly launched a charge. Instead, they utilized guerrilla warfare to fight consumption. These mechanical legions did not move nimbly enough, and even the mechanical life forms of the battle models did not exist. The ones with tracks were all transport vehicles with huge body types. Just by grasping their movement patterns, it would be much easier to deal with them. Emperor Indra walked out from the interior of the super-large mechanical life form, rolling a huge source of energy under his feet. Just at this time, Pradaja's communication came through. Emperor Indra answered the communication, but still carried some caution in his heart. To this day he still suspected that the disappearance of that source of energy core was the work of the Fremons. However, after receiving the message, he realized that Pradaja was requesting them to head to Alto City for support. Pradaja was not at ease with Jangi. He was not at all sure how strong Jangi was. In order to make sure everything was fine, he had the Brahma mutant troops go over to support him as well. When Emperor Indra heard this, a calm and composed smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Since it's your request, Pradaja, it's not easy for me to refuse. We'll go over right away. Right now, all countries were scrambling for missions, all treating the mechanical civilization as a huge piece of fat meat, wanting to obtain more mechanical materials. Right now they had crushed a mechanical legion without much effort, so of course they were willing to go and harvest more resources. That's why Emperor Indra left a few mutants behind to count the loot here and turned back to hand over with Fremon's engineering unit. Then he greeted everyone and headed to Alto City. Alto City. The battle was over. All the Fremon's mutants who came with Jussenberg were all killed in battle. The Mechanical Legion didn't have the slightest interest in their corpses, but instead, along with the construction garbage on the ground, they carried them towards the surroundings of Alto City. In their eyes, these were just as much trash. And in the midst of a ruin less than 10 kilometers away from the battlefield, behind a huge collapsed high-rise building, Jussenberg leaned against the wall with a face full of panic, gasping for breath. What had just happened had plunged him into endless despair. As he was complacent and ready to take out the source of that oversized mechanical life form, the Guay of the 10 demon gods appeared in front of him. The two exchanged just one move, and the Edelman alloy battle blade he was so proud of was directly slashed by the strange black curved sword in Guay's hand. The powerful force shook his arm to the point of numbness. The tiger's mouth was cracked. Just one move made him realize the huge gap between the two of them. He realized that he couldn't win against his opponent, but at this moment, his men couldn't give him any help either, and were even waiting for him to help himself after defeating the enemy. The instinct to survive made Jussenberg make a split-second decision to flee. A black chariot-level enhancement mutant who avoided battle and chose to flee for his life was indeed extremely difficult to kill. This was because the speed he erupted in an instant could be faster than the world's fastest fighter jets. In order to save his life, Jussenberg shamefully fled. But what was left for those Krufa soldiers on the battlefield was the end of death. Jussenberg's heart was beating wildly, and the only thing he could be thankful for inside was that he was still alive. However, this thought only surfaced for an instant, and a crisis of death instantly enveloped his entire being completely. Dazzling light lit up behind him, obscuring everything around him. The collapsed high-rise behind him was blown to smithereens in an instant. Jussenberg's pupil contracted violently, his forehead's silver-curved moon rose, and his figure overlapped like a moon shadow to quickly dodge this terrifying strike. Only after he stabilized himself on the ground in the distance did he see that where he had just been, Guay was standing there, looking at him with a cold and emotionless look. These creatures of the ground are strange. Why do they always try to block our works? And it's amazing that such powerful individuals can be born amongst such weak groups. Presumably he'll continue to interfere with the construction if we leave it alone. Forget it, let's kill it then. Guay murmured in a low voice. His voice was incomparably dull, as if it came from inside a metal jar that way. Jussenberg already knew that he had exposed his position at this point, and without hesitation, he turned around and ran for his life towards the icy sky and snow. As long as I'm fast enough, he won't be able to catch me. I'm going to escape back and inform the people of the Pantheon about the situation here. In Alto City, they must have found something important. Jussenberg swept across the snowy plains like a storm. And his trail, and even the next route of travel, were clearly presented inside Guay's eyes. Looking at Jussenberg, who ran out a long distance at once, Guay's eyes suddenly emitted a demonic red light, which became brighter and brighter, like two burning furnaces, and finally two reddish-colored rays of light shot out from his eyes, penetrating the space between him and Jussenberg in a flash. The air was silent for less than 0.1 seconds, and then where the red light landed, a terrifying explosion occurred. The earth was shaken like a piece of shredded paper, the soil, rocks and ice were like broken confetti, and a huge, incomparable crater was blasted out of the vast expanse of the earth. Jussenberg's speed was indeed very fast, but he was also unable to dodge the full range covered by this strike. He was viciously thrown out, laboriously tumbling thousands of times on the ground before stopping when he hit the ruins of a building. Still a weak creature. Guay said so. When Jussenberg looked up, he was shocked to find that he had caught up close. Your speed actually managed to catch up with me. His eyes could not hide his dismay. Enhancement mutants had the strongest physical body strength, and their speed was second only to the open space ability. However, the Guay in front of him actually had a speed that rivaled his. Yet from the other party's means of attack, it was clear that it was the release department again. It was almost impossible for a person to sit on two chairs that were far apart at the same time. If there really was, then it would be an extremely rare gifted person. Somewhat difficult to kill, the strength of the flesh is very high. Guay made such a judgment in words that were unintelligible to humans. Afterwards, the huge scorpion tail-like sword behind his back was slowly raised, and in the next moment, the joints of the tail blade extended out, aiming at Jussenberg's head to fiercely stab down. Jussenberg had always thought that he was fast, but the speed of this strike was faster than him. Pfft! The spikes pierced into the middle of the flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Jussenberg's body veered away from the vitals in the nick of time, but his shoulder was still stung by the scorpion tail. The barbs on the tail pierced deep into his flesh, even into his bones. Without waiting for Jussenberg to struggle, Guay gave a slight push and directly picked his body up, shaking it in the air like a toy. As expected, flesh and blood is really fragile. Jussenberg was thrown around in mid-air. He clenched his teeth. Surprisingly, He roared angrily, and hardened his hands to tug on the tail with sharp barbs. Then with a fierce force, he ripped the tail out of his shoulder. But along with it, half of his arm was also ripped off. Large chunks of flesh and even bone hung from the tail, and Jussenberg's body fell heavily to the ground. Already realizing that there was no escape, Jussenberg's eyes were red as he roared in anger and charged towards Guay. "Forget it, the game has been played enough." Guay raised the bizarre black curved blade in his hand, which looked somewhat like a scorpion's chelicerae, with an upward curve at the tip. But as he raised the blade up, the red crystals deeply embedded within the blade suddenly surged with a thick and eerie light like blood. Jussenberg's body began to blur on the way to the charge, in 2, 4, 8. Until hundreds of shadows appeared. But this illusion of the moon was like a child's trick inside Guay's eyes. He only took a few glances and confirmed the orientation of where the opponent's main body was. He then raised the battle blade in his hand flatly, and swept it out towards the front as if he were chasing flies. The red-colored crystals erupted with a tremendous amount of energy, surging like a tidal wave and gathering on top of the sword. In the next moment, violent energy surged out. What surged out from the blade was not a sharp sword-on, but a red-colored wave like a blazing fire. In just a flash, it was released from the blade and turned into a red tsunami that swept across the entire land. Unable to dodge. A look of despair appeared on Jussenberg's face. He knew he was going to die here today. However, he was unwilling to do so, and even on the verge of death, he had to let out a furious roar and charge forward. However, at this very moment, the expected pain did not strike. In front of him, the power that raged like a sea of monstrous fire unexpectedly diverged from in front of him, seemingly blocked by a powerful invisible force. A voice rang in his ears. "Finally, I'm not late, it's great that you're still alive." Jussenberg turned his head violently and saw an Asian face appear in front of him. Inside his eyes that had been completely desperate, a flash of light appeared at this moment. He recognized this face. It belonged to Huashu Kingdom's top mutant Chaos. However, immediately afterward, he said to Jangi, "Quickly take me out of here. That fellow is too strong, we're no match for him at all." Jangi's everything under heaven isolated the huge space around him from the present world, and that terrifying crimson torrent could not break it. Jangi looked into the distance, and beyond the crimson torrent, the figure of a huge demon god loomed. "I've come all the way here, how can I know if I don't fight?" Jangi lied. He had not just arrived, but had been here for a while. After confirming that Jussenberg was still alive, he patiently observed the strength of that demon god Guay. And now, he had a preliminary judgment of Guay's power. It was very strong in both melee and long-range attacks, and its strength was at the bishop level. However, it could be fought. At this moment, Jangi's time and space abilities had been raised to a terrifying level. Ordinary release department or enhancement department mutants would have to take a big discount in their own battle power when facing him. This was because mutants without special abilities were simply unable to break through his dimensional gate. Are you crazy? That guy is difficult to defeat, not to mention that he has an entire legion of mechanical life forms by his side. Jussenberg looked at Jangi as if he was looking at a madman. The corner of Jangi's mouth raised in an even bigger arc. Be a good boy and watch the show from the sidelines. He opened the dimensional gate and directly threw Jussenberg several kilometers away. At this time, Jussenberg was severely injured and was unable to give him any assistance. And immediately afterward, the Volt Shadow Troop as well as Liangyu, Deng Shintong, Flower and the others all appeared from within shadow space. "Leave those mechanical life forms to you guys. This fellow, I'll meet him for a while first. Don't get attached to the battle. If the fight doesn't go well on my side, we'll leave immediately." Jangi gave battle orders to everyone. He kept his eyes on Guay without moving away for a moment. When Guay saw the reinforcements that had suddenly appeared from the humans, a hint of surprise finally appeared inside his ancient eyes. Didn't feel their appearance at all, so is it a space attribute ability? He looked down on everything from above, still showing an incomparable indifference towards Jangi and the others. like a human looking down on a nest of ants. It was an innate superiority.